Hey everyone, George Soto here with Pivot Stories. Hope all is well. Today I'm with Marie Prokopets, who's co-founder. Well, you have a bunch of companies right now. You're focused on FYI, but I know you do a bunch of things. How are you, Marie?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks. How about you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for taking the time. It's so funny because we were prepping for this interview webcam thing, and we ended up launching into an hour of consciousness, mindfulness stuff, which I know we both share an affinity to. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. I feel super zenned out after that conversation. So,
Awesome. Well, why don't you take a quick second to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your career background, and what inspired you to launch FYI, and tell us a little bit about what FYI is.
yeah, of course. So let's see. You're right. There are a bunch of products. Right now, it's actually two, and I'll tell you a bit about the others in the pivot side of this. So FYI is one of the products that I'm the co-founder of, and then Product Habits is another one. And my career background is pretty out there, I think. When I was growing up, my parents are actually Russian refugees. They came to America in the 70s. And I was always told, like, you have to be a computer scientist or a computer person or a business person. And I thought, like, no way in hell do I want to do that. And somehow here I am with multiple startups, software startups. So it's funny how we end up kind of following the path our parents want. But for a while I didn't. I went to school for business, and then after my undergrad, I got a master's in English literature and started out doing some writing, worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers doing thought leadership writing. And through that, actually got really interested in consulting and ended up doing a couple of years of mergers and acquisitions consulting and strategy consulting, focused more on retail and consumer. Never touched a tech company when I was a consultant, which I thought was a little strange. Probably would have scared me away back then. And then after that, I went to Diageo, which is the biggest spirits company in the world. And I was doing M&A and strategy there. It was really interesting stuff, really liked the spirits industry. And I was doing innovation too, and learned all about the production lines that, the bottles go on, as well as like how do you select a bottle and the specifications and all the branding side of things too. And I was always a Northeast person. Was born in Connecticut, lived in New York City for a long time. And then one day, Diageo asked me if I wanted to run wine innovation out in Napa. And who could say no to that, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I ended up moving from Brooklyn, New York, with my tiny dog, over to Napa, living in a house. It's actually a winery house on a working winery. And my dog and I were both terrified. We were not used to that, coyotes and all sorts of other creatures. But it was really great. I mean, California is amazing and really interesting to kind of feel the land and the grapes growing and see the drought here and how much the land needs water. And then I decided to move to San Francisco. And as soon as I did that, still had the job in Napa, but I got to know people in tech. It's inevitable when you're out here. And one of them ended up convincing me to meet with someone who is a tech CEO at a company called Meadow. It's a cannabis company. So there was a lot of like synergy between alcohol and cannabis. And I went and talked to him a couple times and ended up meeting my co-founder there. He was an advisor to that company and had some office space there. And ended up somehow doing some consulting with him, and then convincing him to build software. Though we're not sure who convinced whom, because he's like, you convinced me, but I'm like, no, I think you convinced me. But either way, we decided to build some software, made some really bad mistakes at first, and ended up with some really great stuff. So FYI is the one that I'm going to talk to you a bit about today.
Shout out to Heaton, by the way.
That's right. I didn't mention his name, Heaton Shaw. He's my co-founder. So FYI is software. It's cloud-based software that basically solves people's biggest problem related to documents, and that's finding them. So you probably have this issue yourself. There's documents scattered everywhere, like in Slack and in email, in the document creation tools and your storage apps. It's just all over the place. And so what we do is integrate with all those tools and bring your documents into one place. And the reason we decided to build it was we did about 52 interviews with people, and we realized that the number one problem that people have with documents is finding them. Like every single person we spoke with, that was the number one problem. And we really, after that, had no choice but to build FYI.
Awesome. How did you, you know, decide that, you know what, we've heard it enough times, and we've heard it 52 times versus 34 times versus 17 times. Like, it's such a hard balance when you're trying to figure out this product roadmap.
Mhm.
What advice would you give us around really understanding these metrics? What are the right metrics, and when it's time to make a decision and really go down that path, that new path, perhaps?
Mhm. Yeah. So it's interesting. Actually, if it's okay, I'll get into some of the pivot stuff
Sure.
first. So we actually didn't start out with FYI. We started out with a product called Dugo, and it was like pitch deck software. You could submit your pitch deck to investors through Dugo and let them give feedback, or you could basically get feedback or send it, and people could read it, and you would track who opened it. And we learned all about pitch decks and sending documents in PDF form. And it just wasn't a big enough market, we discovered, unfortunately, too late after a bunch of work and many months and interviews and actually launching it with a bunch of customers. And it wasn't right. So we realized we had to pivot it. And one of the things that we learned was that people wanted to add more color to their pitch decks and their documents. They wanted to actually talk through them. Now, let me tell you, this wasn't like a lot of people saying they wanted this. It was kind of a couple people that were excited about it. And we thought, oh, that would be a good idea. Why don't we add audio to decks? And so we created a new product. So we pivoted to something called DraftSend. And DraftSend lets you upload a PDF, and then you can basically like almost make a video with it. You go through the slides and talk, and it records it, and then you can share it with people, and also track who opened it and how long they spent on it.
It's a beautiful product, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Well, the retention sucks. After we
Of
launched,
course it
of
does,
course,
right? It has to,
yeah, of course.
Can't be that easy. Can't be beautiful and have great retention, right?
Oh, totally. It's funny too, because it's one of those things where you get the false positive. We launched it. It did so well on Product Hunt. It was number one product of the day. I think number one product of the week. People really liked it. There was so much buzz about it. But then when it gets to it, like down to it, people don't really want to spend all that time producing that deck. There are other tools that compete with it that you can use, like Zoom, like what we're doing right now, where you can go through a deck and talk through it. So it just wasn't unique enough. Technically, it was really difficult too, and difficult to keep up. And we basically partway through that. So before we really decided to pivot, we were like, shit, we should probably do some interviews. We haven't really done enough. We've built this based on our knowledge from Dugo, but we haven't dug in with a ton of interviews. And we had done a handful, but they were honestly biased. We were like, what do you think of this product? Like, what about this idea? That's not the right way to do it. So we went in a really unbiased way. And that's when we did those 52 interviews. And we never asked people about recording. We didn't ask them about sharing documents. We just said, what's your biggest problem related to documents? And that's when we kept hearing finding documents is the biggest problem over and over again. And in terms of the number of when we realized, oh shit, we shouldn't have built DraftSend or Dugo, we should have just done the interviews and done this in the first place. Honestly, probably by the 12th interview, we realized this is a problem that has just a huge order of magnitude. And it's something that we have to address. And it's also something that we can't address with the existing product. So in part, there's no real like number. In part, it's a little bit of a gut. And also, if 100% of people are saying that something is the biggest problem, it's really worth looking at and building the right solution. And then on top of that, we didn't just then build FYI and launch it. We spent like about half a year where we were in early access and doing a lot of research. First, we built a 5-day MVP, where literally in 5 days, we built like a light version of FYI, where you could integrate 3 different tools. So I think it was Dropbox, Box, and G Suite. You could integrate those tools, you could search, and that's all. And we worked with 10 customers and we did interviews with them. every single week for about 6 weeks in surveys too. And we realized that wasn't just search wasn't enough. We'd have to do more. And then we went back to the drawing board, did a lot more research, a lot more interviews, tons of user tests. And we finally got to, we then had more early access people. We had a feature that wasn't really working. It was called lists, where you could like essentially make a list of like different documents you had and share it. It wasn't really working. Retention was okay. And then we got to finally the format of FYI that we have right now, which is essentially we organize people's documents for them. And the retention was so much better. And we knew that we had like hit the nail on the head. And that's only after we did that, that's when we launched.
Awesome. Marie, thank you so much for that pivot story. That's awesome. I was like, my hands are sweating from hearing these things.
It was very painful at the time, but the learnings were so incredibly valuable that I wouldn't have it another way. So yeah, I would recommend for people to not build two products the wrong way and then finally build the third the right way. Just start off the right way.
Awesome. Well, if folks want to follow you on social media or learn more about, FYI and, any of your other product offerings, what's the best like handles to reach you?
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm Marie Prokopets. I can spell that. It's MarieProkopets. I think that's the best one. And then if you want to check out FYI, it's usefyi.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, and
Yeah.
have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me.